Hello students, how are you all? I hope you all are fine. This is a wonderful opportunity to utilize the online classes without getting affected with COVID. So I hope you all will utilize the classes. And getting into the lesson, today's lesson is a very interesting topic. I am going to give you few hints. With that hints, try to give the lesson name. Okay. What is this? Yes, it is a mango. Are we going to get this mango in any season? No, in summer, isn't it? So, only in summer we get mangoes. In the same way, throughout year we are not going to get that fruit. Like that, different seasons we have different fruits, flowers and vegetables we are going to. Look at this picture. In this picture, if you see in the fourth one, the tree is completely covered with snow. This one, completely covered with snow. If you see in the second picture, the green one, there the tree is sprouting new leaves. And in the third picture, the new sprouting leaves has grown, isn't it? And here in the fourth one, if you see, the ripe red leaves are falling down. What did you observe? Why this is happening? Yes, seasons. And why seasons are occurring? Because of the earth's tilt and earth's movements around the sun, the various seasons in a particular year. Today's lesson is about earth's movements and seasons. Have you ever noticed your surroundings covered with snow? You would have noticed your surroundings covered with floods during rains. But in some places of the earth, the areas are completely covered with snow during some months. For example, Ohio in USA, in this place, the areas are completely covered by snow in winter season. I would like to give you an example of this is Ohio in USA. It snows so heavily in winter in northern countries, and in summer months it is not so cold, but still colder than our state. Whereas the funny thing in this is the day is much longer, so much so that you can see the sun even in the midnight. You all are familiar with this, isn't it? This is globe, a model of the earth. Now in this, locate the places which are south to the equator. What are those places? Australia, South Africa and Chile. These are the countries which are called as south continents. Why the countries in the south continents? Why they are called as countries in the south continents is because they are south to the equator. They are located south to the equator. And here the cycle of seasons is entirely different. If they have winter, we have summer. And if we have winter, they have summer. The pattern of seasons is completely different in the south to the equator. Let us understand why seasons occur. Have you ever thought about it? Why seasons are occurring? Why some months in a year are very warm, some months are very cold, and some months it is very rainy, isn't it? Have you ever prepared paper boats, and have you ever sent that ships on water? We all tried it, isn't it, while we are children. Now you also tried, I think. Now let us understand why seasons are occurring and why some parts of the earth are warm in few months and why some parts of the earth are cold in few months and why some parts of the earth is covered with snow and why some parts of the earth are completely flooded with water in few months. Here, why are the seasons opposite in the north and southern hemisphere? That is, as we have discussed just before, why in northern hemisphere if they have winter, in the southern hemisphere they have summer, and in the southern hemisphere if they have winter. What did you observe? We have observed that there is opposite of climate or seasons in the both the hemispheres. There is opposite seasons. We do not see the same seasons in the southern hemisphere and northern hemispheres, but there is opposite of seasons we see in the both the hemispheres. For this, we have to understand lot of points in this. The complex interaction of various factors we have to understand. To understand these changes, why seasons are occurring, we have to understand the complex interaction between several factors. In that, the first one is the spherical shape of the earth, and the second one is daily rotation of the earth. Third one, tilt or axis of the earth compared to the plane on which it moves, and the earth's movement around the sun, that is nothing but revolution. In this you observe the curvature of the earth. Here the earth is tilting 23.5 degrees. You can see in this picture. The north pole, what is tilt? It is also called as axis. Axis is nothing but which is an imaginary line joining the north pole and the south pole, and the earth is making 23.5 degrees axis or tilt. Children, now let us see one activity. Imagine this torchlight as sun rays. Here, as you know, it is the center of the earth, which is separating the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, is equator, as we all know. Here, the sun rays are falling, making 90 degrees angle here. That is, it is falling vertically. That means it is hitting the equator. That is, the equator will be very warm. If I go little bit, if I take 2 steps back, because of the curvature of the earth, you can observe that how the rays are vertical on the equator, but if you observe, the rays are not that vertical on poles, they are slanting near the poles. That is the reason why we observe the equator is warmer compared to the poles. Poles are cooler or cold than equator. Curvature of the earth, as we have studied, it is having a lot of impact of spherical shape, and how this is causing different distribution of heat over the earth, and how equator gets warmer compared to the poles, because equator is receiving the sun rays vertically, whereas the poles are receiving the sun rays slantingly. This is how the curvature of the earth is making difference in the temperature. The second reason is earth's rotation on its axis. We all know earth rotates on its axis. The earth rotates like a top spin, and it goes around an imaginary line called as axis, which is joining the north pole and the south pole, as we have shown in this. The earth spins, isn't it? It rotates on its own axis. And what is an axis? An axis is an imaginary line which is joining the north pole and the south pole. This line is called as axis of earth's rotation. As we all know, for earth's rotation, it takes 24 hours, 1 day we call it usually, isn't it? So, it moves from west to east. In what direction the earth rotates? It doesn't rotate from east to west, but it rotates from west to east direction. You can see the western portion coming towards the east. That is the reason why we feel that the sun, the moon and the stars are rising in the east and setting in the west. Why? Because this is an illusion created by the eastward spin of the earth. First and foremost effect of earth's rotation, the daily alteration of day and night, as we know 24 hours per one rotation the earth takes. And the second point is, as the portion of earth's surface turned first towards and then away from the sun. For example, if you take a particular place which is very close to sun, first that portion goes towards the sun and slowly it goes away from the sun. And third point is, this variation in the exposure of that particular place, variation of exposure to sunlight causes great variation in temperature and wind movements. Now let us do a small activity. Imagine this torchlight as the sun. If we rotate the earth, then only one portion or one side of the earth only facing the sun, and remaining portion is not facing the sun, which is remaining in dark, but other side which is facing the sun only getting the light. What would happen if the earth does not rotate? Then one half of the earth which is facing the sun will be getting heated and the remaining half would be in darkness. Then the portion which is exposed to the sun's rays will be becoming very warm and the other portion which is in dark will becoming very cold. Then this would make both portions unfit for life. So the earth's rotation is helping the earth to get heat and light on daily basis. The third reason is the earth's tilt and revolution around the sun. As we all know, earth rotates on its own axis and at the same time earth also revolves around the sun too, isn't it? For the rotation it will take 24 hours and for the revolution it will take 365 days and 5.56 hours. At the same time, while rotating on its axis, the earth will be rotating around the sun also. The rotation of the earth around the sun is known as revolution, isn't it? And for this revolution, it is going to take 365 days and 5.56. I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever thought about it? That is, if the earth is not inclined 23.5 degrees, what would have happened? Then, if had the earth just gone around the sun, then all the areas, if the earth just gone around the sun, then it would have meant that all the places on the earth would have experienced the same seasons throughout the year. Did you understand? The same seasons, the total earth would have been experiencing the same. Then only summer or only winter or only rains. Did you get my point? Now, if the earth just gone around the sun, then all the places of the earth will be experiencing the same seasons. But that is not happening now. Why that is not happening? Why we are having so many seasons, variation in the seasons? Because of the inclination of the earth. That is, the earth is tilting 23.5 degrees, isn't it? Because of that, we are getting variation in the seasons. If there is no inclination of the earth, if the earth would not have inclined 23.5 degrees, then the whole earth, it would have been meant that all places would have had the same seasons throughout the year. And also the portions would have some portions might be getting more sunshine throughout the year and other portions would be in completely dark. I am repeating this point. The portions that get more sunshine would keep getting throughout the year in the same way and vice versa. That is, if the earth is not inclined 23.5 degrees, then the whole areas of the earth or the whole portion of the earth will be experiencing the same seasons throughout the year. There will not be any variation, that is summer completely throughout the year or winter throughout the year, like that. And if the portion, then what would have happened? if the earth is not inclined, the same areas would be getting more sunshine and the other areas will be completely in dark. But this is not happening, and we are very happy and we are very lucky, the magic of the earth which is inclined towards 23.5 degrees. Because of that, we are experiencing variation of seasons and we are happily enjoying throughout the year. That is, few months summer, few months winter, few months rainy, and few months autumn, few months spring. But this is not so, because the axis of the earth's rotation is inclined and points the same direction throughout the year. The earth goes round the sun on a regular path, also called orbit. The earth goes round the sun, we all know. The regular path is called as orbit, and on a level plane in open space, this is called as orbital plane. In this picture, look at this picture for a better understanding. As the earth rotates and revolves, the earth revolves around the sun. Earth's axis remain tilted. As we all know, it is tilted 23.5 degrees in the same direction throughout the year. It keeps pointing to the pole star, and which can be seen in the nights only. That is called as polarity of the axis. And in this picture, if you see what happens when the earth goes around the sun, that is called as revolution, we know. And in this picture, let us discuss during some months in the June. If this is in the June, in June, northern hemisphere is little bit tilted, and because of that tilt, what happened, it is facing towards the sun, and while some months the southern hemisphere is tilted and it faces the sun. As a result, when the northern hemisphere has summer, the southern hemisphere has winter. In the 6 months later, if we come here, that is December 22nd and 23rd of the year, in this what will happen, in this December the position changes. Northern hemisphere here has winter and the southern hemisphere has summer. You can also see some months like March here in the March, and September, the sun rays directly over the overhead sun comes and falls on equator, and it makes a 90-degree angle. Here, as the sun rays are falling on the equator, both the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere both are experiencing the same amount of temperatures or the solar radiation. Here, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere will receive equal amount of sun rays. Due to this, both the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere have called as equinoxes. Why they are called as equinoxes? As southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere having the equal day and nights, 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. If we come to here on the 21st and 23rd September, here the overhead sun will be on the equator, and here what will happen, the angle of the sun will be falling on the the angle of the sun will be falling on the equator at 90 degrees. Because of that, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere receive the same amount of energy. The sun on March 21st and 22nd, the overhead sun will be falling the sun rays on the equator. Here, what will happen if it falls on the equator? Overhead sun is at the equator, which receives highest amount of solar radiation. That is, on March 21st or 22nd, the sun will be on the overhead of the equator, forming an angle 90 degrees at the equator. Here, this equator region will receive highest amount of solar radiation on that day. And on this day, two hemispheres, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, as we know, the equator divides both the hemispheres equally. Northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere receive the same amount of solar radiation. Because the sun is falling on equator at 90 degrees angle, both the hemispheres receive the same amount of solar radiation. Because they are receiving same amount of solar radiation, the same nights and day time we will experience. That is, both the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere have equal nights and equal daytime. Here, angle of the sun decreases towards the poles, and on this day two hemispheres receive solar radiation similar amount of 12 hours and 12 hours night and 12 hours day, all the places over the earth. And in this after this day, in the northern hemisphere, here the earth have spring equinox, and in the southern hemisphere it has autumn equinox. Why we are saying equinox is the sun rays are falling on the equator. Because the sun rays are falling at the equator at 90 degrees, the equator is receiving high amount of solar radiation. Because of that, both the hemispheres is divided by equator. We all know the equator divides both the hemisphere equally. So northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere are receiving the same amount of solar radiation. As both are receiving, the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere are receiving same amount of solar radiation, here they experience the same day and night, 12 hours of night and 12 hours of day. Here in the northern hemisphere we are having spring equinox, and in the southern hemisphere we have autumn equinox. Here the earth will be revolving round and it is coming here, and by this date, the date is 21st June or 22nd. Here we have summer solstice. Here the overhead of the sun will fall on the tropic of the Cancer of the earth. The overhead sun will be falling on the tropic of the Cancer. Because it is falling on the tropic of the Cancer, which is in the northern hemisphere, the largest amount of solar radiation will be received by the tropic of Cancer, northern hemisphere in the summer solstice, and on this day length of the day is longer. The length of the day is longest in the year in the northern hemisphere, where southern hemisphere will have the shortest day. I am repeating again, on 21st or 22nd June, the earth came here while in the process of its revolution. The earth, it is revolving around the sun, as we know. Here on the earth faces exactly near the tropic of Cancer towards the sun. As the earth came, the overhead sun came falling on the tropic of Cancer, the tropic of Cancer, we all know it is in northern hemisphere. Because of that, the northern hemisphere will receive highest amount of solar radiation. That is, on that day, the northern hemisphere will experience the longest day in the year. Because the northern hemisphere is experiencing the longest day in the year, the southern hemisphere, which is not in front of the sun, will experience the shortest day. And also here, the southern hemisphere is having a shortest day. In that, one more point I would like to add to this is 24 days, as the northern hemisphere, the tropic of Cancer is facing the sun. Here the Arctic region will be having daylight for 24 hours. Did you understand my point, dear children? See here the earth is Arctic region. We know here it is Arctic, here it is Antarctic. We all know these two regions. As the earth, the overhead sun is falling on the tropic of Cancer. Here the tropic of Cancer is in northern hemisphere. Because the overhead sun is falling on the tropic of Cancer, which is in the northern hemisphere, the Arctic region will experience 24 hours of daylight on 21st or 22nd of the June. And here in the Antarctic region in the southern hemisphere, it will experience 24 hours of darkness. The earth after June 22nd and 21st, it is slowly revolving in its process, and on 21st and 23rd September, again like March 21st and 22nd, like that, again the earth on the equator, the sun will be coming overhead. That is, on the equator, vertically the sun rays will be falling at an angle of 90 degrees. The equator will be receiving high amount of solar radiation here, and because of that, what will happen on this day, the two hemispheres, that is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, will be receiving same amount of solar radiation. As both the hemispheres are receiving the same amount of solar radiation, both day and nights are equal throughout the year on all the places of the earth. And here, as we know that here, as we have discussed here, the spring in the north and autumn in the south. Now the opposite of it will be autumn in the north on 21st or 23rd September and spring in the southern hemisphere. Here, and children, please look at this. I made a little activity. Imagine this as sun, and here on December 22nd, the sun rays, the overhead sun is falling on the Tropic of Capricorn. Here, earlier, here it is falling on the Tropic of Cancer, isn't it, in the northern hemisphere on June 21st and 22nd, and next now it is falling on the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. Here, the Tropic of Capricorn, where the sun rays are falling vertically, this point will receive, in the southern hemisphere, the Tropic of Capricorn will receive largest amount of solar radiation on December 22nd. Here, what will happen with this? The result of it is, on this day, northern hemisphere is having winter solstice, and as the sun rays are falling on the Tropic of Capricorn in southern hemisphere, it is having summer solstice. And let us discuss about the temperature belts. Here we have three kinds of temperature belts. In that, first one is the tropical belt, the temperate belt, and the polar belt. How this effect of the tilt of the axis combines with the spherical shape of the earth to influence the distribution of solar radiation on different places of the earth. That is nothing but how the tilt, as we all know, the earth is tilting, or the tilt of the axis combines with the spherical shape of the earth to influence the distribution of solar heat or solar radiation over the earth. How it is affecting? Because of this effect only, there we have three belts, the temperature belts we have three. The tropical one, the temperate, and the polar belt. Why those three belts differentiation has occurred is because of the effect of the tilt of the axis of the earth combined with the spherical shape of the earth to influence the distribution of solar heat over the earth. When the solar rays strikes the earth's surface, they fall straight in some portions, as we have discussed, they fall vertically making 90 degrees angle, which face the sun directly and fall at an angle as you move away from the portion. That is nothing but here. See this. Imagine this is equator, 90 degrees angle here, the sun, overhead sun is falling vertically, while on the poles it is slanting. I hope you got my point. Here the first point is the effect of the tilt of the earth because of its spherical shape, isn't it? We all know it is spherical shape. That is the reason why the overhead sun, if it is falling 90 degrees on the equator, it is falling slantingly at the poles. And when the solar rays strike the earth's surface, they fall straight in portions which face the sun directly, and they fall slantingly towards the in March, the sun shines directly over the equator, and in the June, it shines over the Capricorn. In March, the sun shines over the equator, while in June, the sun shines directly over the Tropic of the Cancer in the northern hemisphere. Then in the September, again on the equator, and in the December, as we all know, it shines over the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. Here, can you see this picture? Here, just beside around the equator, in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, the areas in the northern and southern hemisphere which are close to the equator, this belt is called tropical belt. This belt gets the maximum heat energy from the sun. Thus you can see that there is a belt within which the direct sun rays fall over some time of the year or the other. This belt extending from the Tropic of Cancer to Tropic of Capricorn is called the tropical belt. The belt which is extending from the Tropic of Cancer to Tropic of Capricorn is called as the tropical belt. As we move away from the tropical belt, move northwards or the southwards of the tropical belt, we reach a region, this green colored region I am discussing about. This green colored region, as we move from the equator northwards or southwards, this region is called as temperate belt. Here, where it gets warm in summer and also cold in winter. In winters, the north portions of this region, as it is just the temperate belt is just below the polar belt. So, the north regions of this region, the north regions of the temperate belt will be completely covered with snow in winters. And if you move further this green belt, that is to north in the northern hemisphere or to the south in the southern hemisphere, if you move little bit, then you will get the polar region or the polar belt. Here this region is completely covered with snow, and here the sun, it is completely in darkness for 6 months. Here, if you move further north or south of the temperate belt, you will reach the polar region, and here in the polar region you see a peculiar type of climate, peculiar season. 6 months no sun on the poles, and 6 months it is completely covered with snow, there is no sunlight, it is completely in dark, and it is completely in daylight for 24 hours of the day. This Arctic region completely remain frozen throughout the year. So as the Arctic region is completely frozen throughout the year, the roots of the trees cannot penetrate into the ice. Because of that, there will be no plant life grown in the Arctic region. Sun appear for 6 months, and as we have discussed, it is completely covered with snow for 6 months, and other 6 months sun appear. As we know, the sun rays fall vertically on the equator and slantingly on the poles. Though the sun appears in the Arctic region, the sun appears very slantingly, the rays will be falling very slantingly, so that a little bit of snow melts. As the snow has melted, small plants like moss or lichens will be growing. Let us recap the lesson now. As we all know, because of the tilt of the earth, we have changes in the seasons throughout the year. While in its revolution around the sun, the earth is facing different areas of the earth are receiving different types, differences in the temperature what it is receiving. Here, if you look at the picture as we have discussed, you can see the same tree undergoing so many changes in a particular year. In this picture, one tree is covered with snow, and the other one is sprouting the leaves. The other tree, the sprouted leaves has grown fully, and in the fourth one, the ripe leaves are falling down. And if we see in the next slide, you can see seasons in India. The seasons, we have Indian seasons names, that is the spring is called as Vasanta, winter Sisira, summer Grishma, monsoon we call it as Varsha, autumn Sharad, and pre-winter we call it as Hemanta Rutu. We have 6 seasons. In our ancient Sanskrit literature we call it as in this way. And coming to this, the earth is tilted 23.5 degrees axis it is making. And what is axis is? Axis is an imaginary line dividing, joining the north pole and the south pole. And during this, in its process of along with rotation, the earth is revolving around the sun. In that process, the earth is moving around the sun. On March 21st and September 23rd, the sun rays will be falling on, the overhead sun rays will be falling on Earth's revolution. The earth is moving around the sun. In that, the sun rays will be falling. Here you can see the sun rays will be falling on the equator on March 21st and 23rd September, and on Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere on June 22nd, and in December 22nd the sun rays will be falling on the Tropic of the Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. temperature belts on the earth, as we have discussed, we have three types of belts, that is the tropical belt, the temperature belt and the polar belt. Regarding the tropical belt, here you can see the tropical belt, that is which is extending from the Tropic of Cancer to Tropic of Capricorn is called the tropical belt, where it is receiving the sun rays directly. That is the reason why this is receiving high amount of solar radiation. After tropical belt, we have this temperate belt. The temperate belt is, if we move northwards or southwards of the tropical belt, we reach a region called as temperate belt, where the region is warmer in the summer and cold in winter. If we go a little bit northern portion of the temperate belt, Arctic region, where it remains completely frozen throughout the year. Okay, after completion of the recap or the summary of the lesson, I am giving you a small homework. Find out which country is called the land of midnight sun in your atlas, and locate it on your atlas and write different types of seasons as mentioned in ancient Sanskrit literature. And one more thing is, I would like to give you one more activity, that just recollect in a particular year what are the different fruits and flowers and vegetables you get in each seasons. Please write it on your own and ask your parents or recollect your experiences, and please write it on your own, so that in summer we get mangoes like that, and in winter it is very cold, isn't it? So what are the different things we get in each season, like different vegetables, fruits and flowers? Please write it. I hope you all enjoyed my lesson. Thank you.